What if the Browns already have their franchise quarterback and don't even realize it? For years, Cleveland has been chasing ghosts at the position. Big names, big contracts, big promises, and almost every time the same ending. Disappointment. Reset. Another rebuild disguised as a new direction. But this time feels different. This time the answer might not be hiding in a future draft class or some blockbuster trade. It might already be standing on the sideline wearing number 2. Shedeur Sanders walked into the NFL with more pressure than most rookies could handle. A famous last name, massive expectations, a fan base desperate for hope, and a franchise that hasn't exactly been kind to young quarterbacks. From day one, people questioned whether he belonged, whether the hype was bigger than the talent, whether Cleveland was just another stop on the league's longest quarterback carousel. But here's the part nobody talks about. When you strip away the noise, the bad offensive line, the coaching uncertainty, the constant comparisons, something else shows up on film. A quarterback who doesn't panic when the pocket collapses. A quarterback who sees the field better than people expected. A quarterback who, despite all the chaos around him, kept showing flashes that made even his biggest critics pause. So why does it still feel like his future is hanging by a thread? Because Cleveland has a habit of falling in love with the idea of the next guy before they finish developing the one they already have. Every offseason, there's a new rumor, a new mock draft, a new veteran name being linked to the Browns as the real solution. And in the middle of all that noise sits Sanders, trying to prove he isn't just another temporary experiment. Then the report started to change. Whispers out of the building that ownership was beginning to see him differently. Conversations about building around him instead of replacing him. Questions being asked to coaching candidates about whether they could develop Shedeur, not whether they wanted to move on. Subtle shifts, but in the NFL, subtle shifts can mean everything. Still, nothing is guaranteed. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in on all the latest NFL drama, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people who love this content just like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another update, reaction, or storyline as it unfolds in real time. I also want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about Shedeur Sanders' performance and the Browns' collapse? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to share this video with friends who follow the NFL. Your support truly keeps the channel moving forward. One coaching hire could seal his future. One front office decision could erase it. The Browns say they want stability, but their history tells another story. And Sanders is stuck right in the middle of that tug-of-war between patience and panic. So here's the real question no one in Cleveland wants to answer out loud. Is Shedeur Sanders the quarterback they've been searching for all these years, or just the latest name on a list that never stops growing? And if he is the answer, will the Browns actually have the courage to build around him instead of starting over again? Because what happens next won't just decide his career. It might decide the next decade of Cleveland football. And the scary part, the decision is being made right now. Shedeur Sanders was never supposed to be just another name on a depth chart. Long before he stepped into an NFL locker room, his story was already louder than most careers ever become. A quarterback raised under the brightest lights, coached by one of the most famous football minds on the planet, and judged years before he ever took a professional snap. To some, he was a can't-miss talent. To others, he was just Coach Prime's son living off reputation. The truth sat somewhere in between. What made Shedeur different wasn't just the arm or the highlight throws. It was the way he played the position, calm when things got ugly, eyes downfield when the pocket collapsed, a habit of turning broken plays into something respectable instead of disastrous. Coaches at the college level constantly talked about the same thing. His poise never matched his age. But the NFL doesn't care about college stories. When draft night came, reality hit harder than most expected. Teams passed, then more teams passed. The quarterback once discussed as a top prospect slipped all the way to the 5th round. Analysts called it a wake-up call. Fans called it disrespect. Shedeur called it motivation, even if he never said it directly. Cleveland became his landing spot, and with that came a completely new challenge. No perfect system, no superstar offensive line, no situation built for a rookie to look comfortable. Instead, he walked into one of the league's most impatient franchises, where quarterbacks don't get time, they get questioned. And that's where people started to misunderstand him. Shedeur was never the flashy, reckless gunslinger some wanted him to be. He was a rhythm quarterback, a timing quarterback, someone who needed structure to show his best version. When the structure wasn't there, the flaws showed. And critics were quick to point them out, ignoring how many young quarterbacks would have looked even worse in the same situation. Teammates noticed something different. They talked about how he prepared, how he carried himself, how he didn't act like a rookie trying to survive, but like a leader trying to figure things out. Even in losses, even in rough games, he didn't fold. That matters more than highlight reels ever will. Still, the league kept asking the same question. Who is Shedeur Sanders really? A future starter waiting for the right system? Or another talented college quarterback who won't translate to Sundays? The answer kept changing depending on who you asked. Some saw a player with rare composure. Others only saw the limitations. But one thing became impossible to ignore. Every time the stage got bigger, he looked a little more comfortable. Every time people counted him out, he responded with moments that made them hesitate. Not enough to silence the doubters, but enough to keep the conversation alive. And maybe that's the real story of Shedeur Sanders. Not a finished product, not a guaranteed star, but a quarterback still being defined in real time, somewhere between expectation and opportunity. The NFL didn't roll out a red carpet for Shedeur Sanders. It handed him a playbook, a shaky offensive line, and expectations that changed by the week. From the outside, people wanted a simple story. Either he was the savior or the mistake. But his rookie season refused to fit into clean headlines. Some Sundays he looked like a quarterback who belonged, moving the offense with confidence, making throws that made fans sit up and say, okay, there's something here. Other Sundays, the game looked too fast, the pocket too messy, the margin for error too small. That's the part nobody likes to admit about young quarterbacks. Development isn't a straight line. It's messy, uncomfortable, and full of games everyone wants to forget. Cleveland didn't exactly make life easy for him. Protection broke down more often than it held. Receivers disappeared at the worst moments. The offense around him felt like it was learning how to walk while he was being asked to run. And when things went wrong, the blame naturally found the quarterback first. But inside those rough stretches were flashes that kept the conversation alive. There were drives where he controlled the tempo like a veteran, reading defenses before the snap, sliding in the pocket just enough to deliver a clean ball. Plays where the situation screamed disaster, and he somehow turned it into points. Those moments didn't happen every week, but they happened enough to make people wonder what he could look like with real stability. Critics focused on the numbers, completion percentage that dipped, turnovers that came at bad times, games where the offense stalled and the cameras zoomed straight to him on the sideline. Supporters pointed to the context: no consistent run game, constant lineup changes, a system that never fully settled. Both sides had a point. What made the season complicated was that Shedeur didn't fail loudly. He also didn't dominate loudly. He lived in that uncomfortable middle where potential and problems exist at the same time. And in a city tired of waiting, the middle is the most dangerous place to be. Teammates kept defending him. They talked about his toughness after hits that would have rattled others, about how he never checked out, even when the scoreboard turned ugly. Coaches mentioned his work habits, the way he asked questions, the way he tried to fix mistakes instead of running from them. Still, the league isn't built on patience. By December, the debates were already raging. Should the Browns commit to developing him? Should they draft competition? Was he being held back, or was he simply not ready? Every incomplete pass felt like evidence for one side or the other. And that's the brutal truth of his rookie year. It didn't give Cleveland clarity. It gave them a mirror. A look at a quarterback with real talent and real flaws, shaped by an organization still figuring itself out. The season didn't answer the question about Shedeur Sanders. It just made the question louder. And what happened next would matter far more than anything that came before. Just when Shedeur Sanders was trying to find his footing, the ground in Cleveland started moving again. The firing of Kevin Stefanski didn't just remove a head coach, it ripped up whatever roadmap the offense had left. Systems change, playbooks disappear, voices that once mattered get replaced overnight. For a young quarterback still learning how to survive Sundays, that kind of chaos can feel like starting over without permission. And Cleveland has seen this movie too many times. Every reset comes with promises of patience, yet patience rarely lasts past the first losing streak. The Browns have built a reputation as a place where quarterbacks are asked to prove everything immediately, while the organization itself keeps changing the rules. Sanders suddenly found himself in the middle of that familiar storm. Front offices always call it a new direction. Players usually call it uncertainty. With Stefanski gone, the conversation around Shedeur shifted overnight. Under the old staff, he was a project, a developing piece inside a system that at least knew his strengths and weaknesses. Now he became a question mark again. A new coaching staff might see him as the future or as someone else's experiment. That reality hung over the entire building. Reports started leaking about how the next head coach would have major influence over the quarterback decision. Translation: Shedeur's future wasn't tied to what he had already shown. It was tied to what a stranger with a new playbook believed he could become. For a player who had spent the year fighting to earn trust, that felt like a second draft. Ownership tried to sound optimistic. They talked about stability, about building instead of tearing down, about learning from past mistakes. But fans in Cleveland have heard those speeches before. The difference this time was that Sanders had already put something on tape. Not perfection, but enough to make the decision complicated. Inside the locker room, the mood was tense. Veterans wondered what the next regime would look like. Young players worried about schemes changing again. And Sanders was left preparing for an off-season where he didn't even know who would be coaching him, teaching him, or judging him. That kind of uncertainty can break quarterbacks before defenses ever do. Yet there was another side to the shakeup. A chance, however risky, for the Browns to finally build something with intention. A new coach could design an offense around what Shedeur actually does well instead of forcing him into someone else's blueprint. The reset didn't have to be a death sentence. It could have been an opportunity. But Cleveland's history made people skeptical. Too many quarterbacks had been sold the same dream before being replaced by the next idea. Too many seasons had started with hope and ended with another search. The organizational shakeup turned Shedeur's second year into something bigger than football. It became a test of whether the Browns had really changed, or were just repeating the cycle with a new face. And hanging over all of it was one uncomfortable truth. The next move wouldn't just decide who coached the team. It would decide whether Shedeur Sanders ever got a real chance to be their quarterback at all. In Cleveland, the coaching search stopped being about schemes and resumes. It turned into a single question dressed up in different words. Who actually believes in Shedeur Sanders? Every candidate walking into those interviews knew it. The Browns weren't just asking about offensive philosophy or leadership style. They were asking how a coach would handle the young quarterback already in the building. That detail changed the entire power dynamic. Instead of choosing a quarterback to fit a coach, Cleveland was quietly testing which coach could fit a quarterback. That's not normal for this franchise. For years, the Browns picked systems first and hoped the passer would adjust. Now the conversation flipped. Candidates were being asked what they saw on Sanders' film, what they would fix, how they would build an offense around his strengths. Those aren't questions teams ask when they plan to move on. But belief in the NFL is fragile. One coach might watch Shedeur and see composure, quick processing, a player who can grow with the right structure. Another might only see limitations, arm questions, mechanics to clean up, habits formed behind a shaky line. The same tape can create two completely different futures. And that's where the danger sits. If Cleveland hires a coach who secretly wants his own quarterback, Sanders becomes a placeholder before the season even begins. If they hire someone who genuinely wants to develop him, everything changes overnight. Careers in this league are often decided by one hire and one opinion formed in a dark film room. Rumors started filling the gap. Names like John Harbaugh floated around, bringing visions of stability and discipline. Some even whispered about Deion Sanders someday stepping into the picture, a storyline too dramatic for Hollywood yet impossible for fans to ignore. None of it was confirmed, but the speculation revealed something important. People were finally imagining a future built around Shedeur instead of past him. Still, the Browns had to be careful. Choosing a coach just to validate a quarterback could backfire as badly as replacing him too soon. The real challenge was finding someone who saw the truth, not the hype or the doubt. A coach who understood that Shedeur wasn't a finished product, but also wasn't a lost cause. Inside the building, the debate grew louder. Some voices argued that starting over at quarterback would be easier than fixing what was already there. Others believed continuity was the only way to escape the franchise's endless loop. Every interview, every private conversation, quietly circled back to the same crossroads. Build with him or build over him. And the candidates knew their answers would be remembered long after the handshakes. Because in Cleveland, the head coach wouldn't just be hired to run a team. He'd be hired to make a verdict on Shedeur Sanders' entire future. But that wasn't the only force pulling the strings. Outside the building, another pressure was growing, one that had nothing to do with interviews and everything to do with the next draft class waiting on the horizon. Even while Cleveland talked about patience, the outside world was already planning Shedeur Sanders' replacement. That's how the NFL works. The moment a young quarterback shows anything less than instant stardom, the draft machine starts spinning. Mock drafts began linking the Browns to new names before Sanders had even finished his first season as the starter. Analysts debated upcoming prospects with bigger arms, flashier traits, cleaner college resumes, and every new projection felt like a quiet vote of no confidence. None of it was official, but rumors don't need to be official to create pressure. Front offices read the same reports fans do. Agents talk. Scouts compare. And suddenly a team that said it wanted to develop a quarterback is being asked why it shouldn't draft another one. The future market became a shadow hanging over everything Sanders tried to build. What made it complicated was that the next quarterback class actually looked tempting. Several high-profile passers were expected to enter the conversation, each bringing a different flavor of hope. One known for raw power, another praised for pinpoint accuracy. A third labeled the safe, pro-ready option. On paper, starting fresh always looks cleaner than fixing what's already messy. But starting fresh also means resetting the clock again. New rookie, new learning curve, new growing pains that could last seasons. Cleveland had lived through that cycle more times than anyone wanted to count. Drafting another quarterback would be exciting for a night and exhausting for years. Yet the idea kept creeping back into every discussion. Insiders tried to read between the lines. Some reports suggested the Browns were only doing homework, not planning a replacement. Others claimed ownership wanted real competition at the position. A few even hinted that a big move could happen if the right prospect fell into their lap. None of it was certain, and that uncertainty was the loudest part. For Shedeur, the noise was impossible to ignore. Every new mock draft felt like a message. Every analyst breakdown turned into a comparison he never asked for. Instead of spending the off-season building on what he had learned, he was forced to defend a job he had barely been allowed to settle into. And fans were split right down the middle. One side argued that true franchises don't quit on young quarterbacks after a single turbulent year. The other side said Cleveland couldn't afford sentiment, not after decades of missing on the position. Both arguments made sense, which only deepened the confusion. The truth was uncomfortable. The draft rumors weren't just about evaluating college players. They were about how much the Browns actually trusted Sanders. If they believed he was the future, the market wouldn't matter. If they had doubts, every prospect would look like an escape door. And that's what made the upcoming offseason feel dangerous. Because while coaches debated schemes and owners talked about stability, the draft clock kept ticking. Somewhere between loyalty and temptation, Cleveland would have to choose a direction. And the choice wouldn't wait forever. Behind all the debates, highlights, and rumors, there's one truth Cleveland fans avoid saying out loud. Shedeur Sanders hasn't proven he's the answer, and he also hasn't been given a fair chance to become one. Both things can be true at the same time. That's the uncomfortable space this franchise is living in. Fans want certainty, but what they have is a quarterback still being shaped by a team that hasn't figured itself out. People argue about his ceiling without agreeing on what kind of floor he's been standing on. Watch the games closely, and you see the contradiction. There are throws that make you believe instantly, tight windows, calm reads, moments where he looks like the most composed player on the field. Then there are stretches where the offense stalls, decisions come late, and the same crowd that praised him starts asking for someone new. The truth hides in the middle, and the middle doesn't sell jerseys. Cleveland has a bad habit of demanding finished products from unfinished situations. Fans remember the long list of quarterbacks who were supposed to save the franchise. Each name came with hope and left with excuses. That history makes patience feel dangerous. Nobody wants to sit through another experiment that ends the same way. But moving on too fast carries its own risk. If the Browns replace Sanders now, and he blossoms somewhere else, this city will never hear the end of it. Every successful throw in another uniform would become a reminder of what Cleveland gave up on. That fear sits quietly behind every argument about the draft. Teammates see a different side than the stat sheet shows. They see the quarterback who stays late, who takes responsibility even when protection collapses, who doesn't point fingers in a locker room full of reasons to do exactly that. Those details rarely make headlines, but they shape how a team really feels about its leader. Still, leadership alone doesn't win games. The league is ruthless about results, and Sanders' results have been uneven. Not terrible enough to close the book, not good enough to end the discussion. He lives in the gray zone where opinions get louder than evidence. That's the part fans struggle to admit. They don't actually know what he is yet. Neither do the coaches. Neither does the front office. Everyone is guessing based on fragments, half a season of starts, flashes of brilliance, stretches of frustration. The story isn't finished, but the pressure to write an ending is already intense. And Cleveland hates unfinished stories. This city wants heroes or villains, not question marks. Yet Sanders remains exactly that, a question walking around in a Browns jersey, carrying the weight of a franchise tired of waiting. The hard truth is simple. He might be the quarterback who finally breaks the cycle. He might also be another chapter in it. Right now, no one can honestly say which version is real. But the next decision will force the Browns to choose what they believe. And choices like that don't just shape seasons, they shape legacies. Everything in Cleveland has come down to a single crossroads. Not a play, not a game, not even one season, a decision about identity. The Browns have spent years chasing stability at quarterback, convincing themselves that the next move would finally end the search. Now they stand in front of Shedeur Sanders, unsure whether he is the destination or just another stop along the way. What makes this moment different is that the answer isn't obvious. If Sanders were clearly failing, the path would be easy: draft someone new and start again. If he were clearly thriving, the franchise would already be building statues in its imagination. Instead, he exists in that dangerous middle where hope and doubt wrestle every week. And franchises often get those moments wrong. Cleveland can choose patience, accepting the growing pains that come with a young quarterback and shaping an offense around what he does well. Or they can listen to the noise, chase the next prospect, and reset the clock one more time. Both choices come with consequences nobody can fully predict. Look around the league, and the lesson is clear. Some teams quit too early and watch their former quarterback succeed elsewhere. Others hold on too long and waste years, pretending problems will fix themselves. The Browns have lived on both sides of that story. Now they have to decide which mistake they're more afraid of making again. Shedeur Sanders doesn't control all of this. He can study, improve, lead, and prove he belongs. But his future will still be shaped by people in offices, by coaching hires, by draft boards, by owners who think in timelines longer than one player's career. That's the part fans forget. The NFL isn't just about talent. It's about timing and belief. Right now, belief is still being negotiated. Inside the building, some see a quarterback worth investing in. Outside the building, others see a team one draft pick away from starting over. Between those two views sits the truth that hasn't revealed itself yet. Maybe Sanders becomes the face Cleveland has been waiting for. Maybe he becomes another "what if" story told years from now. Maybe the answer lies somewhere neither side expects. What happens next will say more about the Browns than about Shedeur himself. Will they finally commit to growing with a quarterback instead of constantly replacing one? Will they trust development over temptation? Or will fear of being wrong push them into another reset disguised as progress? Those questions don't end when the video does. So here's the one I want you to sit with. If this were your team, your decision, your future, would you build around Shedeur Sanders and see the story through? Or would you roll the dice on the next name, hoping this time the search finally ends? Think about it. Because Cleveland is about to answer for all of us.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.